Vaccinations have been around since the early 1800s, and even though they've proven successful and have been recommended by the FDA, many have turned away from these life-saving benefits. I believe this is a mistake, and those against vaccines are simply uneducated on the topic. Vaccinations were created by Edward Jenner in the early 1800s, and since then have only gotten better and more popular. With the medical advancements, vaccinations are able to prevent us from many life-threatening diseases such as polio, measles, diphtheria, influenza, hepatitis A and B, and many other ones. Even though we have this amazing medicine at our disposal, there are many who choose not to take advantage of it for reasons such as control, distrust, risks, and simply their parenting style. And the most recent reason people choose not to is they believe that vaccines cause autism.
In the early part of the last century, hundreds of thousands of people got whooping cough every year. It wasn't always lethal, but it's always miserable. And we figured out a way to solve that. We got a vaccine. We started giving people the vaccine, and sure enough, by the 70s, only about 1,000 people were getting it per year. But it's ticked back up since then, and it's now 15 times what it was in the 1970s. There are a lot of reasons for that, but a big one is that people have just stopped vaccinating their kids. Studies have shown that in areas where a lot of parents don't vaccinate their kids, they're significantly more likely to see outbreaks of things like whooping cough or measles. Measles was officially eradicated in 2000, and yet there have been 288 cases of it so far this year. That's way beyond anything in recent memory, but it's part of a trend. There are a handful of celebrities who have committed themselves to telling people that vaccines, rather than saving lives, are really unsafe.
Vaccines that push children into this neurological downslide, which we call autism.
The doctor who started all this in the late 90s has been thoroughly discredited. He's actually barred from practicing medicine from Britain because he made up his numbers. But that doesn't stop unqualified celebrities from spreading fear. And fear matters. The anti-vaccine body count counted 128,044 vaccine-preventable illnesses, including 1,336 vaccine-preventable deaths in the U.S. since 2007. But in the rest of the world, vaccines have been nothing short of a miracle. According to the Gates Foundation, about 2.5 million lives are saved every year by vaccines. A lot of that is just smallpox alone, which used to kill about 2 million people every year, and today it kills 0 because we vaccinated everyone against it. So when it comes to vaccines, stop listening to the kooks, start looking at the evidence, and just vaccinate your kid.
I, along with many others, do not believe that vaccinations cause autism, and I also believe that if people can, then they should vaccinate. They not only protect the one vaccinated, they protect us as a whole. They also keep the disease itself from coming back. This chart shows how far diseases have declined since the pre-vaccination era. Recently, there was an outbreak of measles in Minnesota. This outbreak was attributed to lack of vaccinations.
Minnesota are tackling the worst measles outbreak in nearly 30 years. Most of those with the disease are unvaccinated Somali American children. Minnesota has the largest Somali population in this country. And the state's health commissioner says the community has been targeted with misinformation about vaccine risk. Jamie Yukas is at Children's Minnesota Hospital, and she joins us now with this story. Jamie, good morning.
Good morning. Here at Children's Minnesota, doctors have treated 34 of the 48 confirmed cases. When patients visit, they're given a mask to cover up. That's because the virus is so contagious that if you're exposed to it and you don't have the vaccine, there's a 90% chance you'll contract it.
Have you gone a day without having a new case?
We have gone 0 days without having a new case.
Patsy Stinchfield is the director for infection control at Children's Minnesota Hospital. She says the measles outbreak started about 4 weeks ago. 46 of the 48 confirmed cases are in children 10 years old or younger.
I just finished doing rounds on these children, and they are miserable. They're in the hospital. They have IVs. They're not drinking. They have terrible coughs. Some have pneumonia.
The measles virus commonly travels through the air, where it can live for up to 2 hours, making it more contagious than the flu. The only vaccine available in the U.S. to prevent the spread of the disease is the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, or MMR.
1 in 1,000 children who get measles will have encephalitis or infection in their brain. They can have permanent brain damage. They can have blindness or deafness. And so we wouldn't vaccinate if this was just a rashy illness. This is a very serious disease.
In 2014, almost 90% of 2-year-old Minnesota children were vaccinated against measles. In the Somali community, that number plummeted to about 40%. Community leader Abdurizak Bihi says it's because of an unfounded fear spawned by anti-vaccine activists that MMR causes autism.
Some parents, they said, at least this is curable because they believe that thing is causing autism and they don't have a choice.
Ikra Mohammed is a Somali-American mother of 5 children. 4 have received the MMR vaccine, but she waited until they were older, even after getting measles herself.
Well, what was that like?
A lot of hospital stay.
Mohammed doesn't plan to vaccinate her 5-year-old until he starts school in the fall.
There is this big decision to make. Are you going to choose to take the risk to vaccinate and get this long-term chronic illness? Or are you going to take the risk of trying to do everything that you can in your power to prevent your child from getting the measles? And it's a very hard choice.
Doctors say false information linking vaccines to autism is hurting children.
Do you get frustrated that this misinformation still is out there?
It is frustrating because we know these diseases are contagious, they can spread, they can take children's lives, and all we have to do is go back to before we had vaccines, where the United States had 4 million cases of measles, and we will go back there if we don't continue to vaccinate.
Scientific studies show there is no direct correlation between the MMR vaccine and an increased risk in autism, even in children who are at increased risk for the disorder. Now, here in Minnesota, health officials say it could take months for this epidemic to be over. That's because they need at least 6 weeks with no new reported cases of measles for the outbreak to be considered finished. Gail?
I think the resources provided make it pretty clear that vaccinations are safe. They are worth the small risk of a sore arm, and they definitely save lives. So please, vaccinate your kids.